Thank you, and thanks to the organisers for all the hard work in pulling this together. I know people get a bit disheartened when we don't have huge rollouts, but it's still important that we're here and that we're going to talk about the major issues confronting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people around Australia. And it doesn't matter that we're low in numbers, we're still here. Because right the way through these struggles, as I said a number of times before, that Aboriginal people in those remote communities need to know that groups of people are gathering right around Australia today and talking this up and sending a very clear message to the federal government and the state government. Now I know there's going to be other rallies and marches in places like Sydney, Melbourne, across in Perth, down in Tasmania. There's going to be huge gatherings in Alice Springs and in Darwin. So we're doing our bit here. We have been getting around the community and spreading the word, but obviously there's a lot of other competing events on today. So don't lose heart. It's still important that we sit down and talk through the impacts of this intervention, the Northern Territory emergency response. And also just looking back over the last few days, there have been major incidents and events and decisions that affect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here in Queensland. On Tuesday, we had the decision handed down in the Queensland Appeals Court on the Palm Island death in custody, and that has got very large ramifications because the Doomadgee family appealed against a Townsville District Court decision to set aside the original findings by the State Deputy Coroner Christine Clements. Remember, back in 2007, Christine Clements, the Deputy State Coroner, handed down her findings, and she found quite clearly that Mulrunji Doomadgee had died on the floor of the Palm Island Watch House because of injuries inflicted by Senior Sergeant Chris Hurley. She is quite unambiguous in her findings, and she sent that brief across to Leanne Clare, the Director of Public Prosecutions. It's now a matter of history that Leanne Clare, the Director of Public Prosecutions, read the brief and said there's no possible likelihood of achieving a conviction against Hurley, so she decided not to lay one single charge. And it took a massive political campaign, largely headed up by our Brisbane activist community, and generated right around Australia, right around the world. We had people from Venezuela, the UK, Europe, signing receipts, signing petitions and letters and sending them in, and those of course we handed straight into the Queensland government. So we generated a massive political campaign around that decision by public prosecutions not to prosecute Chris Hurley. And eventually Peter Beattie, the then Premier, brought in Sir Lawrence Street from down south to conduct a review of Leanne Clare's decision, and then on January 26, 2008, that decision was handed down and Hurley was charged. And then it's a matter of public record that Hurley chose to have the trial conducted in Townsville. We all know what the public attitudes are in Townsville. I mean, Townsville is one of those places around Australia that's got a not pleasant history. It's named after Robert Towns, who made his fortune out of the so-called blackbirding trade. And for years and years and years, we've been fighting to have that name of Townsville changed, because I don't see why this nation should honour a person who made his fortune out of taking boats across to the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu and other areas, and physically capturing men and women to bring across here to work in the state's sugar industries. Townsville. So Townsville stayed true to its roots and acquitted Chris Hurley. And right the way through that, again, we maintained this political pressure. So when the police union and Hurley went to the Townsville District Supreme Court to have the decision set aside in which Clements had found Hurley to be responsible, the Townsville District Court agreed with that. The decision was set aside. So the Mulrunji's family that appealed to the court down here, and on Tuesday the court handed down their findings. They found for the family, so that the process by which the Townsville District Court had set aside the original findings of Christine Clements were in turn also set aside, but the appeals court went one step further. They've also ordered a new inquest. So right now we don't know who this new coroner is going to be, but it is important again that we maintain the political momentum that we built up right the way through this since 2004, because we have the CMC that's down the road, the Crime Misconduct Commission. When Mulrunji is murdered on the floor of the Palm Island Watch House in November 2004, the Queensland Police Service, police officers involved in Palm Island and in Townsville did a number of things that were clearly wrong in law to serve their own interests. They should be held accountable for that. The police investigated the process by which their officers responded to that death in custody. We had terrible things happening, like for example, when two senior cops came across from Townsville that afternoon to investigate what had happened in the watch house cell. Hurley picked them up from the airport. They were two of his mates, took them home to his place for a steak and a beer. Then they went to the watch house, had a look and said, book closed, nothing untoward happened. So the CMC investigated the events on that day in November 19. They were also asked to look into the events that led up to the so-called riot a week later. They were also asked to look at the way in which the tactical response group, these armed thugs, had gone across the island on the 28th of November 2004, put balaclavas on, had laser-sighted weapons, terrorised elders, senior people, small children, even a pregnant woman, heavily pregnant, a cousin of mine. She was 8 months pregnant, and these three coppers raided her house and forced her to lie on her belly on the floor with these laser-sighted weapons. All this material was put into the CMC. It's now almost 5 years since then, and the CMC has not even released their report. So they've investigated this entire situation over a 5-year period, and we still do not know when this report is going to be released. So this week, as said, apart from this build-up to the second anniversary of the intervention, there's also other issues that we should be looking at. And we need to mobilise again, because when they do appoint the coroner, and when the new coroner starts to take submissions, looks at witnesses, looks at material and evidence, then we need to be there. We need to maintain the same sort of pressure that the Queensland Police Union has been maintaining right the way through. And as I said to the media on Tuesday, this entire process makes me feel very uneasy, because it reinforces once again just how predominant a role the Queensland Police Union has in this state. Because down here in George Street, down there we've got our elected representatives, 89 members of Parliament, yet they're absolutely terrified of this police union. They know that the CMC has found, has made certain findings about what happened on Palm Island. These 89 representatives of ours know exactly what happened in the watch house on Palm Island on November 19, 2004, but not one of them's got the guts or the integrity to take on the Queensland Police Union. So again, it comes back to the people. And the same message we're going to send to the police union, the same message we're going to send to the Doomadgee family, the Palm Island community. They are not alone. This is why we need to gather in a place like this and discuss issues such as death in custody and the Northern Territory intervention. And we need to serve a very clear notice on the establishment and our so-called political leadership that we are not going to stay silent on this. We are not going to stay silent on this.